With us, we have Bart Everson. How are you doing today?
I am well. Thank you for asking. How are you?
Fantastic. Thanks for being on the program. All right. So, yeah, on your campaign site, you do acknowledge for top concerns and priorities that people around New Orleans have, and we'll get to those. But the main issue you draw a lot of attention and focus to is climate and the environment. And it makes sense because we all know, based on where New Orleans is located, huge risk of a climate catastrophe. I mean, even seeing what Hurricane Katrina did years ago alone. So this problem gets worse. And yeah, that's a serious local issue to worry about. And, the steps you want to take immediately, from what I read, are declare a climate emergency, adopt a resolution declaring the right to a clean environment, establish a comprehensive New Orleans green dashboard that tracks things such as the city's carbon footprint in a transparent and public fashion, and establish an office on climate justice. And then there are additional urgent steps, next steps that would include holding Entergy, that's the utility that's down there.
That's right. That's the for-profit, shareholder-driven utility that runs our electrical system that is regulated by the city council.
Okay. And improve transportation options. That's always like a huge interest to me. Decarbonize the local economy, municipal composting, ban single-use plastics, updating zoning and building codes, and implement green climate education programs. So amongst voters and residents and or those who are already serving on the city council, do you have a lot of support for any of these?
Well, yes and no. I think that this is something that people give some lip service to. I got in the race, though, specifically because it's really not being talked about that much. In fact, I would say one of the big thing that I've learned from being on the campaign trail now for a while is just how difficult it is to bring these forward. Because generally speaking, when politicians are running for office, when candidates are putting themselves out there for the people, and they're trying to get elected, they want to tell people something they want to hear.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, as a rule, I mean, it's just kind of the prevailing winds, the way that they blow in these events is like, all right, what's your message to us that we want to hear? And I'm really out there trying to talk about some things that people don't want to hear, but that we all know we need to hear.
Oh, sure.
We'd rather not think about it. I mean, it's kind of difficult to come to grips with for the city of New Orleans. It's like an existential threat. And that's very clear, and we know that, but we feel kind of disempowered, right? And so it's kind of like, oh, that's just too big and it's too scary.
Oh, sure.
To think about. So it doesn't get talked about. And that's been my role then on the campaign trail to try to inject it into the dialogue so that the other candidates kind of keep hearing about it as well and feel compelled or almost like they're given permission now to talk about it a little bit more. And whoever wins the race, they're definitely going to have to be dealing with this new climate reality.
Oh, definitely, of course. And while it's something that, because there's so many other things going on that people are focused on, and as you said, this isn't something people always want to hear. I mean, when it's too late, they're all of a sudden they're going to wish they heard about it before it was too late. So you're doing the right thing. But is there any solid opposition against any of it?
I did. So we live in a Democratic stronghold.
Okay.
And all the other people in the race are Democrats. And I believe that they understand that climate change is real. They're not deniers. In fact, one of them even said to me at the first event we had after Hurricane Ida, which just swept through here like a month ago.
Oh yeah.
He said to me, Mark, I can't believe everything you've been saying on the at these campaign events. It was borne out by Hurricane Ida. It's all true, which is gratifying to hear. Of course, you'd rather not be validated by a storm that deals in death and destruction. It cut such a swath across the country, really.
Oh sure.
But it's definitely true that now more than ever, all of a sudden, people are on board. Now, I did speak at the Orleans Parish Republican Executive Committee,
All right.
and I had a feeling there as I was talking about this stuff. I had a feeling that the older Republicans in the audience were in complete denial.
Wow.
And they just didn't want to hear this. But the younger Republicans went out of their way afterwards to say, "Hey, great speech,"
Oh wow.
because they know that this is something that they even more are going to have to be living with than old folks like me.
Oh wow, definitely. Well, that's a good sign to hear that younger people, even as you said, in Republicans now are coming around with this climate issue. Because when you said the older ones just were in just complete denial of it, I mean, yeah, that's scary. And it was scary saying, oh man, that's the direction that party is going. When, it used to be mixed, when we go back 30, 40, 50 years, like the EPA was in Earth Day, I mean, was done when Nixon was president.
Yes.
And then even where I grew up in New Jersey in the 80s, during the Reagan era, we had a Republican governor, and he did some good environmental things, like like the Pine Barrens. It's a part of South Jersey, the whole nature reserve. It's supposed to be one of the most diverse ecosystems in the country, maybe even the world. And then even along one of the interstates, Interstate 78. Well, here it's called Route 78. It wasn't until I left New Jersey that people say like I-35 or whatever the interstate number is. But nonetheless, though, there's like animal crossing bridges over it. And a lot of people don't realize that exists in America, because when you're on social media, someone will show a picture of one that exists like in somewhere like in Asia or Europe, saying, oh, wow, look how advanced and better they are. And, ooh, we need to get this here. And I'm saying, it already exists here, not too far from where I live, and it's exists for a long time. So it used to be like a not as partisan issue. There might have been differences on how to go about it and such, but and
Yeah.
then things just got ridiculous,
Yeah. One of the
with the
most
major
fascinating,
parties and the
one of the
denial, as you
most
mentioned.
one of the most striking examples of that, I think, is there's old PSAs, public service announcements from the National Rifle Association.
Wow.
That if you listen to them, and these are going back to maybe the 60s or 70s, and they're like they sound like the Green Party or something, because
Oh, sure.
they're talking about how we have to protect the environment, and we have to treasure the beauty of the natural world, and they're waxing eloquent about this. And then at the end it says, "This is brought to you by the National Rifle Association." It's so different from what they've become now.
Yeah.
It is really disturbing and distressing to see how polarized it's become around an issue that should transcend partisan politics. But clearly, the extraction, this extractivism, this idea of exploiting natural resources for maximum profit, that's really where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. And that's where I think this partisan divide really emerges, because some folks in our country just will not see that we have to curb that
Sure.
we have to stop the rape of the earth at any expense, at any cost. Otherwise, we're not going to have a home.
Oh, wow, that's right. And also, the things that I just went over and such, I know improve transportation options, because that's another thing that, does pertain to everybody regardless of their views, just getting to and from work. And, sometimes owning a car isn't the most affordable option for a lot of people, but they still need to get around. And when you talk about improving transportation options, are you talking about like bike lanes? Are you talking more bus routes? Are you talking light rail, or a little bit of all of it?
Yeah, definitely all of it. I'm a bicycle commuter myself.
Nice.
I've been riding my bicycle to work for 21 years now.
Wow.
And it is a great way to get around New Orleans because it's flat here. It's never really too cold to ride.
Mm,
Our major problem would be some rain,
yeah.
and you might get kind of sweaty. But other than that, it's a great way to get around, and we need to do better for sure by our bicyclists and by our pedestrians, because we know that actually there is a large portion of New Orleanians who don't have cars. A lot of people don't realize that one reason we had so many folks who didn't evacuate for Katrina, for example, was that we had fully a quarter of our population who didn't even have a car. And everything was built around the automobile at that point with the
Mm,
evacuation plans and so forth. But bicycle stuff only gets you so far. Not everybody can ride a bike. There's
sure.
lots of issues there. I certainly believe in that, but I think the number one priority has to be, in terms of what the city council can do, it's got to be improving public transit. And in New Orleans in particular, I would say that the city council needs to promote a new millage tax, a property tax that would, significantly improve our public transit options. We really have a situation right now that, with like many American cities, it's very automobile focused.
Oh,
Everything's
yeah.
centered around the automobile, and we need to shift that to the point of where it becomes more attractive to take public transit. Just because it'd be cheaper and easier and cleaner and quicker than getting in your car and driving to have to worry about parking, all that other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And this is possible, right? I mean, if we just invested in it. I've visited other cities that have that kind of public transit, and that's what we need. And we're so far from that. Right now, public transit is very kind of biased along lines of class, and
Mm,
of course, in America, that also means it's biased along the lines of race. So it becomes something that a middle-class white guy like me doesn't even think about taking public transit, because we're wired to think of almost tribally about these things. And that needs to change. We need to make a public transit system that's attractive to everybody. But first and foremost, clearly, it's the way that a lot of our lower income citizens used to get to work. And right now, it takes just an absurdly long time to get from home to your place of employment on public transit.
oh,
So
sure.
we need to fix that. And so there's the city of the future. And this is where the battle for sustainability will be lost or won, is in our cities. The city of the future has to be one where we get around the city without consuming vast amounts of energy. Right? We have to do it in a low energy and certainly low carbon method. So we have to electrify everything and promote any and all means of getting around, such as like a bike or good old fashioned walking, that don't actually consume power off the grid at all. And
Oh,
another thing that people don't think about that much, I know I certainly didn't until I got educated on this issue a little bit, is that there's also implications here when you talk about public transit and other transit issues. There's also real implications for affordable housing,
oh, yeah.
because the folks right now who need the public transit the most are also the people who need affordable housing the most. So you need that housing along the public transit lines.
Exactly.
And so anyway, it's all interrelated, of course, and
It
that's what
is.
our city council needs to look at, a holistic picture.
Yeah, because that was another thing I was going to bring up, because I know, for example, housing and gentrification is one of those 4 issues that you've mentioned on your site that, is on the minds of a lot of people in New Orleans. And I'm also glad that you mentioned how it also needs to be hand in hand with the transportation situation, because otherwise, for example, where I live in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, right outside New York City, we have trains, but a lot of it's all geared toward going in and out of New York City. So so when it comes to like class and all that, all kinds of people use it. So if there's a problem with the train, then everybody feels the same pain. But also, I've noticed though, when it comes to housing gentrification, is that like places where there are train stations and where there's like really good public transit happens to be where a lot of these like luxury apartment complexes are being built too. I mean, I think that's something that's going on everywhere. This craze of
It
like,
is, you're absolutely correct.
like just pricing people out. And that's like, you know what? I mean, it's a lot of the people who could afford to live there may just be like, I might as well just buy my own house at that point. And also, I mean, I know what it is. It's trying to say, well, it's slightly cheaper than living in New York City. So instead of living in the city, move here. I mean, like when it comes to people who have high paying jobs in Manhattan and whatnot. But the thing is that when it comes to people who would benefit the most from public transit, whether it's being right along the train line or even bus routes, because there's a lot of bus connections near those places too. A lot of them are, if this doesn't get under control, a lot of people who need it the most are going to be the ones who get priced out. And a benefit that this area has that a lot of other places in the country don't, may not be as available to people who live around here who need it the most. And that's why, when it comes to improving the transportation, it's also to, also make sure it's done hand in hand with affordable housing and what to do about gentrification. That way, the people who could benefit from it the most are actually able to.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be a part of the planning process. And that's absolutely what's happening in New Orleans for sure. The one thing that I found really interesting is there was a development in my neighborhood recently that advertised itself as the first permanent affordable housing in the city. So you have a lot of these builders, developers will come in and make an apartment complex, and then to get some tax benefits, they put in, a certain number of affordable units, but those all have sunset clauses on them. They all,
sure.
like after 10 years or something, they go away. And then all of a sudden, all the prices go up. It's just all market value prices, and the affordable component is just gone. So what this one neighborhood group did was they actually bought the land underneath a housing, an apartment complex, and they established a community land trust.
Oh.
And that's going to hold the price down. And it's just basically like a combination of community land trust and rent control, to my understanding. Nice. And anyway, these are guaranteed to be the rental price of the apartments are pegged to the local median income, something like that.
Wow. So that's good, because as you mentioned with sunset clauses, or how, after a certain time, the affordable units are no longer there. Another thing I've seen when it comes to those is they only make a small percentage of them affordable housing too. Just so they could say, hey, we're building affordable apartments, and it'll only be like a small percentage of it that is too. But that on top of it's set to expire is that's awful. But it's good to see that something's being done about it, though.
Something. So I really like the community land trust model. I think it's something that more people deserve to know about and to explore, because it essentially separates the value of the land from the value of the building that's on the land.
Sure.
And this is what usually drives the price of rent up so substantially.
Nice. And as far as the other issues that are on the minds of people in New Orleans, we just went over the housing and gentrification. There's also violence and crime, crumbling infrastructure, and racial justice and equity. What policy recommendations do you have regarding those?
Well, it's not the centerpiece, of course, of my campaign, because I talk about this climate stuff, and one thing I like to point out is that whatever your issue is, because different people focused on different issues.
Sure.
Whatever your issue is, the climate crisis is going to make it worse.
Oh, definitely.
So, in particular, I think most people are concerned these days. There's been a real awakening, I feel like, to just in the last couple of years, to the deep divisions in our society, the inequities, which are really deeply ingrained. And the climate crisis is going to exacerbate all these divisions and make them worse unless we're extremely proactive. In fact, even a lot of the solutions that are proposed to the climate crisis are going to make these issues worse if we're not very intentional and thoughtful about how we go about it. So I like to say that, this issue, the climate issue, is going to affect all these other issues. And if we don't deal with it, we won't even have any of these other issues. So that's why I always make that paramount. Now, when it comes to, nevertheless, I have to kind of tell people, my take on different things. When I'm out there at a campaign event, I can't just, say climate, we need to focus on the climate and pretend like I didn't hear the question. Because I hate it when I do that. And I feel like I to be a credible candidate, you have to address these very real issues that people are talking about, like violence. I had a friend here in New Orleans who was killed in a home invasion back in 2007. She was kind of a prominent local artist. And so it was really just one of those events that got everybody's attention. And it was the crime was never solved.
No.
So it was pretty tough to take. Obviously, hurt her family and the community a great deal. And of course, she was just one of so many people in New Orleans who have been victimized and harmed. This is really an issue that touches everybody in the city. So anybody who's running for public office has to address it. And I am just very frank with people that I feel like radical solutions are called for.
Oh,
because
sure.
we have had, we've fiddled with the same system basically my entire life, for long before I was born, in fact. It's been the same basic model of kind of crime and punishment, the same basic justice system, if you want to call it that. And all we've done is fiddle with some of the parameters. And we get variations on the same results. The crime rate goes up a little, it goes down a little, and people, when it goes down a little, they say like, oh, this is good, this is progress. And when it goes up, they wring their hands and say, this is terrible. But in reality, it hasn't shifted very much, right? I mean, we're still living in a system, and in particular in New Orleans, a system where we lock up an astonishing percentage of our population. One of the highest incarceration rates in the world. It was the highest. I think Oklahoma might have surpassed Louisiana recently. Ooh. But and yet it hasn't solved the problem, because we know that it merely reproduces the problem.
Oh, sure.
There's all kinds of great critiques about that. But but we need to get beyond critiques. We need to get to solutions. And so I propose several solutions that I think we have to, if we want radical change, we have to implement radical solutions. So let's eliminate poverty. We can do that directly by through a universal basic income. It's usually talked about at the federal level, but there's been some municipal experiments with that as well.
Nice.
This is what Martin Luther King was working on when he was assassinated. And we can, so eliminating poverty is one step. Getting all the profit motive out of the drug trade would be another, by legalizing drugs. We've taken some steps in that direction nationwide. In New Orleans in particular, we have just effectively decriminalized marijuana in Orleans Parish, which is a great step in the right direction. But we need to go much further than that. We need to just legalize it all and take all the resources that we foolishly allocate towards interdiction and punishment and put those into treatment and dealing with drug abuse as a public health and mental health crisis, which is what it is. And finally, and most radically, I would say we need to invest fully in education. Now, there's other things sound radical, and education just sounds, well, wholesome. Everybody can agree on that. But in fact, I say it's more radical because the other two would have an immediate effect. We'd see immediate return on on those decisions. But investing in education is long-term. We have a historically underperforming educational system here in New Orleans, one of the worst in the country. And we have struggled with that for so long. We need to invest whole hog in education, and the payoff will be in the long run, but it will be a great payoff.
Oh, definitely. No, definitely. Those are some great ideas. And what made you decide to go with the Green Party, as opposed to independently or trying to go in a Democratic primary, for example?
Yeah, well, for one thing, we have an open primary system here, the true jungle primary, as they call it, open blanket primary. It goes by different names, but basically it means it's everybody against everybody in the primary. And so regardless of party affiliation. So on this upcoming election, it'll be me and three and me, all in one, and everybody can vote, no matter what party you're in. I've been for, as far as I know, for forever. The Green Party only officially got ballots here in Louisiana in 2005, and we've had it ever since. So you can register as a Green. Nice. Before that, I believe I probably was independent. The thing is that the values of the Green Party, which are kind of clearly articulated, in particular the four pillars that they usually talk about, ecological wisdom and social justice and grassroots democracy and nonviolence or peace, those really speak to me. Those are my values. I knew that this is the party that I wanted to be a part of ever since I had the opportunity to get involved. Nice. Starting in 2000. So I've really been a Green Party organizer for 2 decades. And there's never any question in my mind when I ran for public office that I have to do so with the party that reflects my most deeply held values. Now, a lot of people locally, a lot of very progressively minded candidates, they will run as Democrats here because they feel like they'll get shut out completely if they don't. Oh, sure. The Democratic Party does have kind of a stronghold, some might say a stranglehold on the local city government. All the elected officials around here are Democrats. In a red state, a state where all the executive offices are all held by Republicans, except for, weirdly enough, our governor, who is a Democrat. But that's kind of a historical fluke. So I always knew that I was going to run as a Green, but I also understand, and I've seen over the years, why a lot of folks don't, why a lot of folks run as Democrats.
Because they figure there's only two parties that have a chance of winning, so I might as well pick one of them. And that's why I know ever since like in 2016 when Bernie Sanders threw his hat in the ring, he's always been an independent, but even he figured, well, the only shot I'll have at being president would be to run in one of the major parties. And then, that became a thing for people running at other levels of office. They'd run under the same column as him,
Yeah.
and they'd run in that primary as well. And
And
you
there are
mentioned that,
certain major forums here in the city
yeah.
that are run by the Democratic Party. And so if you're not a Democrat, you're not going to be in the forum. And so a lot of people see that as a deal breaker or whatever, that they have to run with the party.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because you did mention, you have open primaries where you live. I know a while back I did an episode about open primaries, and
I saw that.
yes. So I don't know. Do you like the idea of open primaries?
I do. I do. I think that there's arguments to be, I think ranked choice voting is much more significant
Oh, sure.
in certain areas, I guess you would say. Statewide, the Republican Party has, in the state of Louisiana, the Republican Party has just, become more and more powerful. And they are now looking at, there's a real debate in the Republican Party about closing the primary system again, going back to closed primaries, because they feel that open primaries don't allow the party more control over who eventually would be the Republican nominee. And you tend to get somebody who's, I guess, a little bit more centrist, and they feel like they want somebody who's a little bit more right wing, I guess you would say, a more more reflective of where the center of the Republican Party is, rather than the center of the society as a whole. So there's this debate right now amongst the Republicans about, should we close the primaries again, like they used to be decades ago, or leave them open? And the rest of us are just hoping they stay open.
Oh, wow. Well, no, that's good to hear, because when I did that episode and I went around promoting that episode, I was running into some interesting reactions to it. Like, for example, and I think it depends on how things go in a particular state. Because when it comes to New York State, the Green Party there, and a lot of people there who are Greens, are vehemently against the idea of open primaries. One of them said they would be a death blow to third parties. And that's because the way it is in their state is that they, like, one candidate could run in multiple parties. So you could still, example, vote for Andrew Cuomo without voting Democrat, because you could probably also vote for him in the Working Families Party. So seeing that situation is bad enough as it is, they fear that it'll make it even worse there, where it's like, we might as well not even have a third party, because like Democrats, for example, are just going to like send just enough people to infiltrate and make it go their way, as opposed to the way that most people who truly are a Green or whatever third party want it to go. That's like, all right, so state by state, case by case, some things would have to be reformed first before implementing an open primary in a certain state. I get that. I mean, my reason for wanting open primaries is simply because of how the system is in this country with it. I mean, I would understand closed primaries more if we were in a more parliamentary system, or if we had high voter turnout, 3 or 4 major parties, and most people voted and voter turnout was 90%. In that case, I'd be like, all right, well, if you find one of these parties that aligns with you the most, pick your party, stay in your lane, I'd get it in that case. But that's not the case here. I mean, voter turnout is really low in this country compared to other places. And the two major parties, which in many states, including mine, are the only ones that have like a publicly funded and administered primary election. When it's the primaries, it's through convention, if for libertarians or Greens, but when it comes to a primary election, it's only Democrat or Republican. So we're already paying for that, when it comes to being a taxpayer and all that. But also, they're the ones getting the most media attention. So we know how the whole duopoly works. And I know, for example, in 2020, I mean, yeah, there's a green on my ballot for president, and then there's a green on my ballot for US Senate. And that was known all along. All right, great. Well, when it comes to all these other offices like US House and then like county level offices, I mean, there just, weren't any greens or any other third party really for those. But in the Democratic primary, all the way down through on the county level, even there were progressives running, under that Bernie Sanders ticket. We had someone running, Bernie crats, I call them. There's one running for US Senate and for US House in my district, and two of them running for county level. So it's like, I would like to have especially if I know it's only going to be a Democrat or Republican in the general election for those offices, then I'd at least like to have say on who makes it on there. And at least, without having to do a write-in, be able to vote for someone I truly want to vote for. So that's why I would believe in open primaries. Whereas, as much as I definitely voted green for president and US Senate, and as much as I'd vote that way and identify as such, when it comes to the other offices where that party's not going to be in the general election, I'd like to have say on who will be. So that's my belief on why I would prefer primaries to be open. And that way people who don't want to identify as a certain party don't have to. Like if you vote in that primary, you got to register as that party. And then, it's on public record that you're in a party that you may disagree with like 85% of the time, but you registered as such because there was a candidate you really liked running in their primary. And some people may take issue with that, and then that leaves people out as well.
Yeah, it does get complex, but there is a kind of matter of principle that you alluded to, and that is why should we all, general John Q. public, the taxpayers, why should we pay for private party primaries?
Yeah, if we're not allowed in them.
Yep,
Exactly.
seems like a kind of simple matter of principle right there. So
exactly. And when it comes to anyone who's running for office at the local level or citywide level, or who's thinking about it, like whether it's as a green or an independent or any party that's not Republican or Democrat, what kind of advice would you have?
well, I would say that you have to really think, gosh, what advice do I have? If I were to give any advice, it would make it sound like I've figured this out or something. And
Okay.
I've never run for public office before.
Oh, wow.
So, this is, I've never held office before. And this is a learning experience for me. So I'm learning as I go. So I would say, here's what I've learned so far. One is that it's very important to be clear about, why you're running. What is the point of the campaign? Because I felt like it was wildly unrealistic if I was to say, like, I'm going to run this office, I'm going to run this race, and I'm going to be elected to office. It's just the odds against me are so steep that would have been like a delusional statement to make. But then I also found that people don't understand how our even very well-educated people that I know, friends and so forth, that seem really savvy in some regards, don't seem to really understand how our political process works. And so they didn't want to hear me speak realistically about my chances. Just to give you a indication, two of the other candidates in this race had $250,000 campaign fund each before the campaign even began. And, I had nothing. So as we know in this country, there is a pretty strong correlation between what you spend on your campaign and you know how you perform. You have to have money. Now, it's great. It's very inspiring to see grassroots candidates kind of claw their way up and do
Sure.
great things. But these are really, really steep odds
Oh, yeah.
for someone like me, right? So, you know, a good showing for a candidate like me would be to actually get into some percentage points and not just be a fraction of a percentage. I mean, you know, that's just realistic. I've seen many of these campaigns go down, and I see how third-party candidates do. I've seen how grassroots candidates do, even if they're registered Democrats, registered whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're a regular person, you know, and not a member of the political class, if you're not an established candidate, you know, who's held public office before and has the name recognition or celebrity or something like that, you face almost insurmountable odds. And yet, I found people didn't recognize that. The people basically had a very naive view of the political process, that it's like some kind of meritocracy, or like you just line up all the candidates, let them talk about their great ideas for our democracy, and then the people with the best ideas will advance, you know, and take a seat at the table and be a part of government. And that's just not how it works.
No.
You know, you got to be much more cynical about things, and by cynical I just mean realistic.
Oh, definitely.
You know, that's when the system is rigged. It's not rigged like Donald Trump means when he talks about the system being rigged, because he's a billionaire or whatever, you know. But the system is kind of stacked against the idea of, you know, the citizen candidate. So that's the one thing that I've learned so far, is that I had to be very clear with myself about why I'm running and what realistic expectations I can have here, while at the same time being very careful about how I frame that, because nobody wants to hear like a message like, you know, I'm going to lose. That's not a winning message in America.
No.
So of course I don't lead with that. I don't say that. I feel like I can say it more candidly with you, because most of the people listening to this are not going to be local, right? They're going to be outside of the local arena, and they're probably fairly politically savvy. So, you know, that's why at every campaign event, I always end with the thought that whoever wins this election is going to have to deal with this new climate reality that we clearly are in now. And we have to, the citizenry, the people, the voters, have to hold those people accountable, no matter who it is that wins the election. We have to hold them accountable for climate action and climate justice. So that's my message to the voters at these campaign events.
Definitely. And you're running for city council, so yeah, that's where there's more of a chance for someone in your type of party to actually win. I know the most recent candidate I interviewed was an incumbent. You know, he was green, but he won as one. He won re-election as one a few times, and he's running for re-election again. So, you know, we always hear, like, when it comes to the presidential elections and everything, how there's no chance. And of course, people get caught up in the whole lesser evil game. But as we go down each level of office, you know, that's when there is a little more of a chance. Even in 2020 in my state, when I mentioned there's only a president and Senate candidate, you know, the Green U.S. Senate candidate got like more than double the amount of votes that the presidential one got. So as we go down the levels, you know, people feel a little more looser and comfortable with, you know, what do I really want? What do I really care about? So, you know, the chance is there. And you even mentioned percentages. Is there any type of threshold that they have in Louisiana or New Orleans, or as if you hit it, even if you don't win, but if you hit that percentage, it's like it's better for next time around? You know, whether it's not having to get signatures, things like that, or matching funds and whatnot.
There is not. The laws for ballot access here are pretty easy.
Okay.
So we just have to run a candidate for statewide office or federal every 4 years or so, I think.
All right.
And it doesn't really matter. We have to have at least, I think, 1,000 registrants across the state. And when they changed the law, loosened it up for ballot access, they made it pretty easy to get that access. So now we have 5 recognized parties, I believe, in the state of Louisiana.
Nice. Well, that's good. And is there anything you'd like to plug at all? Any way people could help your campaign or learn more about it?
Well, of course, I would like to direct people to my website, barteverson.com. That is my personal site, which I turned into a campaign site. So you can learn a lot about me personally, but there's also a lot about the campaign and the specific policy proposals. And that's really the reason, that I got in the race in the first place, was to try to inject this into the civic discourse, right, into the public dialogue. Is it worth running? Even if victory is a long shot, I think it is, in order just to get people talking and thinking about these ideas, because I'm pretty sure that the policy proposals and so forth, you can see there on the website. I have hopes that we'll have the opportunity after the election to engage with whoever might be the winner in promoting those policies, and that in other races they'll also be talked about and so forth. So that's why I'm putting them out there. So people can go to barteverson.com. They can sign up for the campaign newsletter. They can make a donation. They can just read and see what the policies I'm talking about are. And we need more climate candidates. So I'm hopeful that somebody hearing this will say, like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna take a chance next time I have the opportunity and step up, get out of my comfort zone. Because that's what this has been for me. I was very comfortable. I have a full-time job. I don't need to run for office, right? It would be much easier for me not to run for office. And believe me, in some ways, we didn't even mention, but the election has been postponed because of Hurricane Ida. So I've got a whole 5 extra weeks on this campaign.
All right.
And I can't take it anymore. It's a lot. But I also find it incredibly humbling and moving to have the opportunity to get out of my comfort zone and get out there and talk to people about probably the most important issue that that's facing humanity right now. So maybe somebody listening to this will, say, like, I'm going to take that step sometime in the near future, get out of my comfort zone, run for public office as a climate candidate, because we need to see more and more of those across the country.
That is right, we do. Well, Bart, thank you again for being on the program, and definitely good luck with this election.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely.